It's 3 in the morning, the lights are off, the night vision camera is on.
Did you hear that? Zach! Oh God! What is it? Stop!
A grown man with frosted tips is standing in what used to be a hospital, yelling at the empty air like it owes him money. He demands answers, he demands respect, he demands that the ghost show itself. And when nothing happens, he gasps, clutches his chest, and announces that the room is suddenly filled with rage, hatred, and possibly a demon.
No. Hold on. I just saw. You're shaking. No, I know. I just saw. There was a.
Who doesn't like being on basic cable. This is Ghost Adventures, a show that once promised raw, dangerous, no-holds-barred paranormal investigation, and somehow evolved into a weekly improv exercise where the ghost is always angry, the evidence is always compelling, and the investigators are always one unexplained draft away from a spiritual breakdown. Back in the beginning, Ghost Adventure sold itself as something radically different.
Boom. Let me see it.
No psychics, no mediums, no calming background music telling you how to feel. Just 3 regular guys locked overnight in America's creepiest locations, armed with cameras, EMF meters, and an almost heroic disregard for personal safety. It was framed as dangerous, authentic, and borderline irresponsible, which, to be fair, was exactly why people loved it. But somewhere along the way, the lockdown investigations turned into theatrical seances, skepticism turned into certainty, and curiosity turned into confrontation. What began as a rough-edged experiment in paranormal TV
was this ball of light and energy that manifested into this hand that only my camera captured
slowly became a parody of itself, where every creak was a demon, every feeling was possession adjacent, and every episode felt like it was one cold breeze away from an HR complaint filed against the afterlife. So how did a show that once felt genuinely unsettling become a meme-generating factory of spiritual aggression?
Rats is right here.
Shut up.
Don't leak. Keep it still. Keep it still. I'm just documenting this right now.
And at what point did hunting ghosts turn into bullying them for content? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning, before the demons had catchphrases and before the investigators started treating ghosts like unpaid supporting cast members. Before Ghost Adventures became a weekly parade of spiritual ultimatums and invisible rage fits.
Who's there?
Oh, I got cold.
It started in a way that almost feels illegal by today's standards. Small, scrappy, and weirdly sincere. In the mid-2000s, paranormal TV was already a crowded house. You had polite investigators asking spirits nicely to knock once for yes, twice for no, and you had soothing narrators reassuring viewers that everything was respectful, scientific adjacent, and definitely not staged. Then along came a group of guys who looked like they'd just wandered out of a Hot Topic parking lot and said, what if we didn't do that?
Oh my God, I'm starting to shake, man.
I know. Just don't open yourself up to them.
I'm trying, man.
Do
I'm
not
trying.
say you're starting to shake.
Okay.
At the center of it all was Zak Bagans, who in 2004 co-created a low-budget documentary with Nick Groff and Aaron Goodwin. The original Ghost Adventures film, shot at the notoriously reputed Goldfield Hotel in Nevada, leaned hard into danger and isolation. No camera crews, no dramatic recreations, just locked doors, handheld cameras, and the constant implication that something could go horribly wrong at any moment.
What the f*** is wrong with him?
I don't know, but I got 1 minute of tape left.
Nick, what's wrong with you, dude?
And for a while, that worked really well. The rawness felt authentic, especially compared to the overly polished competition. The investigators weren't calm experts. They were visibly scared, confused, and sometimes completely out of their depth. When something unexplained happened, it felt earned, not because it was proven, but because the reactions were messy and human. That documentary eventually caught the attention of the Travel Channel, which greenlit the series in 2008. Paranormal TV was cheap to produce, endlessly scalable, and perfect for late-night audiences craving adrenaline with their insomnia.
analysis of the video, you can clearly see the shadow from my arm and hand here.
When Ghost Adventures officially premiered as a series in October 2008, it was marketed as the dangerous alternative, the show that went further, stayed longer, and asked harder questions than anyone else on cable.
Nick, weren't you saying in Italian, come draw energy?
Yes, it hit you, Zach, and now it's hitting Aaron.
I can't even stand up.
Early seasons leaned heavily on that image. The investigations were darker, the tone more confrontational, and the premise simple. Lock 3 guys inside allegedly haunted locations overnight and see what happens. If ghosts were real, the show suggested, they weren't gentle. They were angry, unpredictable, maybe even hostile. Ghost Adventures didn't just want to observe the paranormal, it wanted to provoke it.
No, I can't.
We just received our highest EMF spike ever recorded on this device.
And at first, that provocation felt bold rather than desperate. The show expanded quickly, spawning specials and spin-offs as its popularity grew, and Zak Bagans became one of the most recognizable faces in modern paranormal television. He wasn't whispering respectfully into the void. He was staring it down and daring it to blink. The problem was that this entire premise depended on escalation.
I don't even remember that much. I remember screaming, but I don't remember knowing what I was saying.
And escalation, by definition, never knows when to stop. The problem with building a show on escalation is that eventually you run out of places to go that don't involve yelling at drywall like it personally betrayed you. For Ghost Adventures, the first cracks didn't appear as one big scandal or catastrophic failure. They showed up quietly, episode by episode, as the tone shifted from investigation to accusation, from curiosity to confrontation, and from "did something just happen?" to
People come here to die. Do you think the trend is gonna keep going, or it just stops because we're here?
something is always happening, and it is very mad. Early on, the show still maintained a thin veneer of uncertainty. EVPs were debated, shadow figures were questioned, feelings were framed as reactions rather than evidence. But as seasons piled up, ambiguity became a liability. Paranormal television doesn't reward doubt, it rewards confidence.
The exorcist we've worked with before had given us some holy anointing oil to use in an emergency situation just like this.
And confidence slowly turned into certainty. Every location wasn't just haunted anymore, it was one of the most dangerous locations we've ever investigated. A phrase repeated so often it might as well have been trademarked. This is where Zak Bagans began to change on camera. Not gradually, not subtly, but dramatically. He stopped being the guy asking questions and became the guy delivering ultimatums. Spirits weren't asked to make contact, they were challenged, provoked, accused. If something felt off, it wasn't fear anymore, it was oppression, infestation, or full-blown demonic influence. The language escalated fast, and once demons enter the chat, there's no going back to maybe it was just a draft. Viewers notice. Longtime fans started joking that Zak was angrier at ghosts than most people are at their landlords. Memes circulated about him threatening spirits like they were interns who missed a deadline. What once felt intense now felt theatrical, and worse, predictable. You could almost set a timer for when someone would announce they felt sudden rage, dizziness, or an unexplained urge to leave the room immediately.
Have something to do with Carl Lawson's possession?
If I leave, we all have to leave!
Then came the internal fractures. Nick Groff, one of the original co-creators, slowly faded out of the series before officially leaving. The explanations were vague, diplomatic, and deeply unsatisfying. Creative differences, different directions. The kind of phrasing that translates loosely to, "we are absolutely not saying what actually happened." Fans speculated endlessly, forums filled with theories, and the show quietly carried on as if losing a founding member was just a minor paranormal fluctuation. With Nick gone, the balance shifted further. Skepticism thinned, pushback disappeared. Aaron Goodwin increasingly played the role of emotional barometer, reacting in visible fear, while Zak drove the narrative forward with unwavering certainty. The dynamic became less about investigation and more about validation.
Could this threat have been directed towards Nick because he's the only one of us that's married?
If Zak felt something, the episode treated it as fact. Critics began pointing out a deeper issue. Ghost Adventures wasn't just presenting paranormal experiences, it was narrativizing them in real time. Every feeling had a cause, every reaction had an entity attached, and those entities were almost always hostile. This mattered because the show frequently filmed in places tied to real trauma: prisons, hospitals, sites of violence. What once felt like spooky exploration now felt uncomfortably close to exploitation, especially when emotional responses were framed as spiritual attacks rather than human reactions to disturbing environments. As social media grew, so did the backlash. Clips circulated on YouTube and TikTok, not to showcase evidence, but to mock it. Reaction videos dissected episodes frame by frame, pointing out dramatic editing, reused sound effects, and moments where compelling evidence looked suspiciously like someone bumping a camera. What used to be water cooler conversation turned into debunk compilations with millions of views.
Guy's permission to perform an exorcism.
That's fine, you have my permission.
Totally have my permission.
And yet, the show didn't pull back. It doubled down. More demons, more possessions, more declarations that something dark had followed the crew home. At one point, Ghost Adventures stopped feeling like a paranormal investigation series and started resembling an ongoing supernatural soap opera where the main antagonist was an unseen force with a personal vendetta against Zak Bagans specifically. The peak of the collapse wasn't a single episode, but a realization among viewers that nothing could surprise them anymore. Every location followed the same emotional arc. Calm entry, rising tension, sudden rage, emergency exit, dramatic recap. Even the fear began to feel rehearsed, not because the cast was necessarily faking experiences,
Who's here with us right now?
but because the show had trained itself into a corner where escalation was the only acceptable outcome. By the time headlines shifted from Ghost Adventures captures shocking evidence to is Ghost Adventures going too far, the damage was already done. The show was still airing, still producing content, but its cultural credibility had eroded. It wasn't must-watch television anymore, it was ironic viewing. Comfort trash, background noise for people who once believed and now watched out of habit, or for the unintentional comedy. Ghost Adventures didn't collapse because it was exposed as fake. It collapsed because it became loud where it used to be, curious, certain where it used to be unsure, and hostile where it once felt genuinely afraid. In trying to prove the paranormal was real every single week, it accidentally proved something else entirely. That mystery doesn't survive constant explanation, and fear doesn't survive repetition. The reason Ghost Adventures feels so hollow today isn't because people suddenly became smarter, more skeptical, or allergic to paranormal TV. It's because the show quietly abandoned the one thing that made it work in the first place.
No.
What's the matter, Aaron?
I'm chilling. Oh my God, all over, bro.
Hold your ground.
The possibility that nothing might happen. Early Ghost Adventures understood, even if accidentally, that tension comes from uncertainty. You lock yourself in a building overnight not because something definitely will happen, but because something might. That might is where the fear lives. Modern Ghost Adventures doesn't allow for might. Every episode arrives preloaded with conclusions. The location isn't potentially haunted, it's dangerously infested. The spirits aren't unknown, they're hostile. And the emotional reactions of the crew aren't responses, they're symptoms. The show stopped documenting experiences and started diagnosing them, often in real time, without pause, reflection, or the slightest hint of self-doubt. This creates a closed loop where the narrative can never be challenged. If Zak feels angry, it's a demon. If Aaron feels scared, it's an attachment. If someone questions it, that skepticism itself becomes part of the haunting. The system is airtight.
Maybe if we had been able to hear those threats with our own ears, we would.
Not because it's logical, but because it refuses to admit alternative explanations. Anxiety, suggestion, exhaustion, and the psychological weight of being in dark, emotionally loaded spaces are never allowed to exist on their own. Everything must be paranormal, or the episode collapses. And structurally, the show is trapped. Paranormal TV thrives on novelty. But Ghost Adventures has been running long enough that novelty is impossible without escalation. You can't keep promising the most dangerous investigation ever for over a decade without eventually sounding like satire. The demons get bigger, the stakes get higher, and the claims get wilder, not because the evidence demands it, but because the format does. Social media only magnified this problem. Clips don't circulate because they're convincing, they circulate because they're absurd.
Whoa, it said Bishop.
Bishop?
Yep. That was good.
A single out-of-context moment of Zak threatening an unseen entity now lives forever as a meme, stripped of atmosphere and presented as comedy. The show isn't competing with other paranormal series anymore, it's competing with its own highlights reel, edited by people who don't believe a word of it. There's also an ethical fatigue setting in. When every tragic location is framed as a battlefield between demons and television personalities, it starts to feel less like exploration and more like spectacle. Real suffering becomes set dressing. History becomes content. And viewers, even the ones who still enjoy the show, can sense that something is off. The fear feels performative. The danger feels exaggerated. The sincerity that once carried the series is gone, replaced by a machine that must keep feeding itself bigger reactions to justify its existence. Ghost Adventures isn't bad now because ghosts stopped cooperating.
I killed.
This is easily one of the most impactful statements we have ever documented.
It's bad because it no longer trusts the audience to sit with uncertainty. It insists on explaining everything, proving everything, feeling everything at maximum intensity every single time. And in doing so, it drains the paranormal of the very thing that made it compelling. The uncomfortable silence where you're not sure if you just saw something or if your brain is playing tricks on you. When a show about the unknown becomes absolutely certain, there's nowhere left to go. And that's the real haunting Ghost Adventures can't seem to escape. Ghost Adventures almost worked because it once understood that fear lives in uncertainty. Early on, it didn't need to prove anything. It just locked the doors, turned off the lights, and let silence do the heavy lifting. You weren't watching for answers, you were watching because you didn't know what might happen. Over time, that restraint disappeared. Mystery was replaced by certainty, curiosity by confrontation, and atmosphere by non-stop escalation. Every ghost became a demon, every emotion became possession adjacent, and every location turned into the most dangerous place we've ever investigated. Not because the evidence demanded it, but because the format did.
These exposed studs, you can see a dark, unexplained mask moving intelligently in the background.
What died wasn't belief in the paranormal, it was trust. Trust that the audience could handle ambiguity. Trust that nothing happening could still be interesting. Once a show about the unknown becomes absolutely sure of itself, it stops being scary and starts being loud. Ghost Adventures didn't fail because ghosts aren't real. It failed because it refused to let them stay mysterious. Like, subscribe and tell us which reality show should be put out of its misery next.